I'm Doug Ullman with the Civil War Trust War Department. I'm sitting here at the inverted V on the North Anna battlefield, where from May 23rd to May 26, 1864, the Union Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia once again locked in battle in the heart of the Overland Campaign. I'm joined by Mike Miller and Bobby Krick, both historians and both experts on the North Anna battlefield. We're going to talk about what happened here 150 years ago. So guys, after a bloody 2 weeks here in May of 1864, Grant is once again trying to get around Lee's right flank. Is Grant just the most unimaginative commander, or what's his plan here?
Based on his previous experience in the West, his target was really Lee's army. So the movement to the North Anna was a chance to, at first, get Lee out of the trenches.
Even though he's been successful at stopping Grant's army every time they've met in battle, he's really on his heels, and Lee doesn't like to be on the defensive. So Bobby, how is Robert E. Lee trying to take back the initiative here?
Well, Lee tried to seize the initiative, but didn't have the tools to do it. And Lee, of course, was having to make do with what he had. His next alternative was the South Anna River, which is even less defensible, and then the Chickahominy River, which is not really in question, and then the outskirts of Richmond. And so, although you don't see it in the tone of his dispatches, I'm sure there was a little bit of desperation and anxiety greater in Lee's mind than had been earlier in the campaign.
And speaking of anxiety on Lee's part, his army has been just put through the ringer. Both armies are really not accustomed to this kind of pace of fighting. We haven't really seen that in the East. What's sort of the toll that all this has taken on the army?
Lee had lost Longstreet, he'd lost Jeb Stuart, A.P. Hill was sick, Richard Ewell was sick, Lee himself was sick, confined to his tent with dysentery, unable to take advantage of the brief window of opportunity that he had presented to him here at the North Anna. And evidence of just how sick he was is from the story about one of his staff officers going into his tent and saying, General Lee, you're too sick to command the army, we need to call in General Beauregard. And that's my version of a last resort. That's at the highest level. At the lowest level, or the lower level, Confederate Army was extremely emaciated from just the appalling losses of the Wilderness in Spotsylvania and the 3 consecutive weeks of marching and fighting.
Arriving on May 22nd, Lee establishes a strong blocking position on a series of commanding bluffs south of the river. Grant reaches the North Anna on May 23rd and begins crossing that very day, testing the rebel lines. Several days of indecisive fighting follow as Grant realizes the formidable nature of Lee's position. It's a trap designed to force Grant to split his army into pieces where it can be defeated in detail.
Now, when does the fighting really begin in the North Anna battles?
2 large episodes on the 23rd, the fighting for Hennigan's Redoubt on the north bank of the North Anna River, and then the balance of what we call the Battle of the North Anna is the fighting at Jericho Mill, which was also on the afternoon of May the 23rd. Some action on May 24th, including where we are here at Ox Ford, and then some sputtering on the 25th and the 26th, and then the morning of the 27th, Grant was gone.
The vantage point you're looking at is if you're a Union soldier, the 22nd Massachusetts, coming up to this plateau and looking across at open fields. You've actually breached the Confederate line at North Anna, and there's no one here. Why? And all of a sudden, they start to hear a rustling out there in the trees, and they know what that means. The Confederate battle line is advancing.
The great view over my shoulder is similar to what some Confederate soldiers would have had during the zenith of the fight at Jericho Mill on May the 23rd, as some Confederates managed to burst out of the trees behind the camera and threaten to drive elements of the Union 5th Corps back to their pontoon crossing over the North Anna River. 4 brigades of Cadmus Wilcox's Confederate Division were engaged here, different degrees of severity. Those with the greatest success were able to surge across this field, elbowing aside refugees from Griffin's Federal Division and Cutler's Federal Division, only to be stopped in a dramatic episode when they ran face first into a roaring line of Union artillery, which was posted on the ridge in the middle distance over my shoulder. Canister fire in the nick of time was sufficient to stop the Confederate threat from Wilcox's division.
When people think about the Battle of North Anna, they usually hear one of two things. They hear about this inverted V where we now sit, and they hear about Lee trying to trap Grant. What is this inverted V, and how does it figure into Lee's plan?
Basically, even after the salient at Spotsylvania, which does not work out so well, and he says we must have no more salients, they come up with a salient position, which is the inverted V. Because you have the inverted V, Grant can cross at Jericho Mill, and he can cross the Telegraph Bridge, but by his sheer impetuosity, divides his army into 3. Because now he's got the 5th Corps over here, it's going to be the 6th Corps, 9th Corps still on the north bank, and the 2nd Corps is over here. Three parts that are divided by the North Anna River. So if one wing wants to reinforce the other, you've got to cross the river twice.
So Bobby, what goes wrong for Lee? Why doesn't he attack?
Well, Lee didn't attack because of his own personal sickness, which literally confined him to his tent, and so that steady leadership was missing. But beyond that, his top trustworthy subordinates were no longer at his disposal. If this was a situation in 1862, Stonewall Jackson would have been on those isolated Yankee corps like a hawk on a groundhog. And in 1864, there was no one to turn to. The most tangible result on the battlefields of North Anna, the most tangible effect, was seen the following week at Cold Harbor, because he got himself into a pickle with this Confederate inverted V. He was vulnerable. Confederates didn't come out of the entrenchments to attack him here, and so Grant read that as evidence that the Confederates had lost their backbone. He went on record on May the 26th, writing to the authorities in Washington. He says, Lee's army is really whipped. They won't fight outside of their own entrenchments anymore. I may be mistaken, but I think the result is assured. And then a week later, he attacked at Cold Harbor with ill preparation and got smashed, badly smashed.
Yeah, North Anna, they really talk about it as a puzzle piece. You know, you have your puzzle of the Civil War, and Gettysburg is a piece, and Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor. But North Anna is that missing piece that kind of draws it together so that it makes sense.
It is that important puzzle piece that connects that first part of the Overland Campaign to Cold Harbor. Bobby, why do you think that this segment of the Overland Campaign is probably the most overlooked of the 4 major battles?
I think the answer to that's pretty easy, Doug. There's 2 things. One is the lack of a well-defined battle. Jericho Mill is the heaviest fighting at North Anna, but it's not a very large battle compared to the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor, all of which were massive. But beyond that, it's also a matter of preservation and accessibility. There's a direct relationship between visitors going to battlefields and the notoriety and publicity of a battlefield.
Well, there you have it, folks. The Battle of North Anna, a chess match fought on a pristine battlefield. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Bobby. And thank you for watching.
The spectacular view in the distance over our shoulders is the historic Fontaine Farm. To my knowledge, this is one of literally a half dozen places in all of Central Virginia, battlefield places, that has the desired recipe of historical integrity of the landscape and historical significance of what happened on the ground. And I think most historians admire what happened here and are aware of the significance. Wouldn't you agree with that, Mike?
Absolutely agree. And it's easy to visualize what happened here, and easy to teach that to students of the Civil War or the general public. You can almost hear the rebel yells and Union huzzas here on these fields, echoing even to this day.